Welcome to Middle Earth, everyone. I'm just a humble hobbit from the Shire, and we're here to discuss the Lord of the Rings film back in theaters, directed by Peter Jackson, who I know from, he also made the remake of King Kong back in 2005, but more famously, the Lord of the Rings Trilogy, based on the books by J.R.R. Tolkien. And this is what started it all, guys. This is what inspired it all. Whenever you think about video games like Skyrim, World of Warcraft, or other series like Game of Thrones, this inspired fantasy and medieval epics. One thing I want to say is this film transports you the whole time you believe that you are going on the adventure of the Lord of the Rings. There's not a second that goes by that you are not fully transported to the world of Lord of the Rings in Middle Earth. And seriously, guys, for many, the fan base of this series is diehard on the levels of stuff like Star Wars and top franchises that you can name. Me personally, I definitely would say that I wasn't an expert on the Lord of the Rings. It's something that over time I've definitely become more and more of a fan of. And the reason why I'm doing this video now is because the Lord of the Rings just got re-released in theaters. All the movies are the extended editions, and they're pretty long, with, for instance, the final movie being over 4.5 hours in the theater also. So when I recently rewatched the films, there's two different versions of the movies. There's the extended and the theatrical cut. So I'm pretty sure I've only seen the extended versions. So I went back and I watched the theatrical version, and I gotta tell you, I really enjoyed the way that the films were edited and the pacing and the way it was cut. And it's probably gonna be hard to track down the original theatrical versions of the movie. They're not as long as the extended versions, but I actually recommend those. Or in other words, I really liked the theatrical versions of these movies. So I watched The Fellowship of the Ring over again and The Two Towers, but I was able to see Return of the King in theaters, extended edition, and it was the end of the journey, and we're going to get to that. But we have to start off with The Fellowship of the Ring. So my history with this series was the original extended edition DVDs that we have here. And these are just so awesome. Look at them. They're like books. So The Fellowship of the Ring is what is most nostalgic for me. And just seeing the Shire and the whole intro of the Lord of the Rings with Bilbo Baggins and Frodo and Samwise and Gandalf, and how the whole story starts off is magical to me. So what else I have to say about that? Before there was the Lord of the Rings, there was the Hobbit movies. Now, after they made the Lord of the Rings, they did make the Hobbit movies, and depending on who you ask, you're going to get a different take on the movie. But I enjoyed them, especially to see how it all started and what came first. Remember, the books of The Hobbit came before the Lord of the Rings, and the story tells what happens before. But the movies were made after the Lord of the Rings. And it also ties into the story of Lord of the Rings. Bilbo Baggins had the ring, but now this isn't Bilbo's story. It's his nephew, Frodo Baggins, who Gandalf gives the job of delivering the ring. But guys, this review isn't going to go too heavy into spoilers. I'm just going to talk a little bit about the movies and recommend that everybody go check it out, because it's been awesome diving back into them. So what I want to mention is the actors. So the main characters of this are definitely Frodo Baggins, played by Elijah Wood, and Samwise Gamgee, played by Sean Astin. And he's a famous actor from stuff like The Goonies and more like Stranger Things and too much to even mention. So Sam has to be my favorite character in all of Lord of the Rings. You wish you knew someone who had your back like Sam does for Frodo. I mean, really. Every moment with Sam is my favorite moments. We'll get more into the adventure that they go on. We have to mention Gandalf, played by Ian McKellen. Now, Gandalf is one of the most legendary figures in all of fiction and literature. He inspired stuff like Obi-Wan Kenobi and everything you can imagine. It all goes back to Gandalf. And the actor did a perfect job, a defining performance as Gandalf. And Gandalf also appears before The Lord of the Rings in the Hobbit movies. So it's actually a huge pleasure to get them back for the Hobbit movies. And the only thing more I'll say on the Hobbit movies is those movies are filled with callbacks and Easter eggs and returning characters sprinkled throughout it. So I think that alone is a great return to the series. So besides Gandalf, there's the evil Saruman, played by Christopher Lee, who's also famous for Count Dooku in Star Wars and many more horror films. And I love the scenes with Saruman and Gandalf, and they're battling it out. Any scene with the both of them, even when they're having a face-off and a standoff, just talking, these are two titans on screen together, and you could tell that they loved every moment of it. And there's that story about how Christopher Lee, when he passed away, the last movie he wanted to see was Lord of the Rings. Now, the Fellowship of the Ring is not just Frodo, Samwise, and Gandalf. Also from the Shire, they're joined by Merry and Pippin, who are great comedy or great comic relief at all times. And they're also joined by Strider, who is later referred to as Aragon. Another thing about Aragon is he's a human, unlike the hobbits, Frodo, Samwise, Merry, Pippin, and unlike the wizard of Gandalf, this is a human, and much of the story is going to be focused around Aragon. They're going to be the character that has the primary love interest in this movie with Arwen, the princess of the elves. And throughout the movies, it gets deeper. The love triangle continues. We also have to mention Eldron, the king of the elves. Also, you can't forget the lovable dwarf warrior, Gimli. Also, some characters I have to mention, or else this video wouldn't be complete, is the elf warrior, Legolas, played by Orlando Bloom. And they're just iconic and so badass. And unlike Aragon, they're not a human, they're an elf, just like all the characters from Rivendell. And of course, we have to mention the badass Sauron, who just has such an iconic presence, and they are the ultimate bad guy of Return of the King. And the first movie is a classic. I think the first movie has the most contained story. The Fellowship starts the adventure. So guys, I'm not going to talk about everything in the series, but from now, I'm going to start touching on major story points and spoilers, so be warned. The Fellowship eventually gets into a battle with the Balrog, and they're saved by Gandalf, who sacrifices himself, and they have a battle with the Balrog, and on top of that, the ring has an effect on everyone. The ring possesses people, and someone else who was along them in the fellowship, Boromir, succumb to the temptation that the ring has on you. And Boromir is defeated after he betrays the fellowship. The movie actually ends on a cliffhanger, but that was probably annoying to original viewers when the movie premiered and it first came out. But we don't have to deal with that anymore. We have all the movies that we can marathon whenever we want. So that ends the Fellowship of the Ring. The Two Towers, I'm going to touch on a little bit. So what happens is the movie starts off with a recap of the battle with the Balrog, and we're soon introduced to Gollum Schmeagol, who works with Frodo and Sam, but they're cautious of him, but they need his help because he could help lead them on their journey to Mordor, but he doesn't know that they're going to destroy the ring. And along this movie, there's more love triangles with Aragorn. This is where more famous moments occur. So many surprises that I don't even want to touch on. And these movies are deep, guys. These movies might be hard to follow compared to other movies I recommend, but the way that they made these movies is a lot like the way that they made movies in the old school. This film is what's known as an epic. It's a giant war. It's a giant battle, and it's very serious in tone. And seriously, guys, there's not a second that you don't believe that you're in the middle of the battle. Something I will say is, for me, The Two Towers felt a little bit like a filler because the way that everything gets resolved in the movie and we're on our way and we're continuing. I really don't want to touch on too many of the plot points. Frodo and Sam are captured and they meet the king, who Boromir was his favorite son, and nothing can replace that for him. Also, Gandalf the White returns. That's right. Gandalf the Grey has been resurrected to Gandalf the White, and he helps the kingdom when their king is under Saruman's spell. And the Fellowship breaks up after the first movie because they get separated, and everybody gets separated. Merry and Pippin get separated from Aragorn, and they think they're dead. They find out, and seriously, guys, all the plot points in this movie, it all comes together, and it's so entertaining. And that's all I want to say about The Two Towers. And I'm just going to touch on the final film just a little bit. Return of the King starts with a bang because it teaches you the history of the ring and how Gollum became Gollum. He was possessed by the ring and he killed to get possession of the ring. It is such a good intro. I watched the extended cut, so some more stuff I'll say about this film is there's got to be an hour-long battle at some point of non-stop action where they don't even say a word of dialogue. It's just action non-stop if you watch the extended cut of this movie. But this is the finale of the series. This is such inspirational piece of literature and fiction. The journey that Frodo and Sam went on from the Shire to Mordor, and the ring is taking over Frodo, and Sam has to help him, and he does a lot. They ration food. He's carrying, dragging Frodo. He's motivating him, giving him any bit of hope he can. And this is where the story all leads to. This is where all roads lead to. You couldn't trust Gollum this whole time, and this is where he really shows that he didn't have good intentions, and even the food that Frodo and Sam were saving just gets thrown away by Gollum in the end. And even Gollum makes you worried, and he turns you against Sam in such a twist, in such a turn, because Sam is such an honest character, and he has your trust, and you never thought that he would turn on you, and Golem puts that in your mind, and eventually it shows to be true, because the ring possesses people. Even he gets the greed for the ring at one point. I love Sam's character here. They went through this whole journey, and he says, if there was ever a girl I would marry, it was Rose Cotton. And he went through this whole journey. If he went through this whole journey, he could have some courage to ask out Rose Cotton. More I'll say is this movie also starts with the battle against Saruman. It was almost reminiscent of Revenge of the Sith, how that started off. Maybe they got some inspiration there, but it was such a strong battle, such a strong scene of that character, and it also led to his death. The ending to this series, guys, the ending to this series, the way it ends off, is the peak to it all. I might say that the Return of the King could be the best of the series. I love the Fellowship of the Ring, but it all leads up to Return of the King. And even the ending is so emotional, ending it all. But I definitely recommend also watching The Hobbit. I can't touch on everything, guys. I won't touch on everything. But wow, the saga of the Lord of the Rings. It's something that the more you watch it, the more details you learn about, and the more you enjoy. You're never done learning about the Lord of the Rings. There's just a wealth of lore wrapped into these movies, and the more you watch it, the more you notice. And also, it's a very rich in behind the scenes and how they made these movies, the filmmaking and special effects behind them. Guys, that's as much as I can say. This is a series that you'll never be done debating, but I'm glad I was able to talk about Lord of the Rings. So let me know if you checked it out. They also had a little intro by Peter Jackson for each one of the movies, and that was pretty cool. But I want to know from you, did you go check it out in theaters? Even if it's over, I definitely recommend going back, watching all the movies again. Maybe you guys already do that all the time, like I do with my favorite movies, but I'm starting to add this to my list. Even if it's not on my list of favorite movies that I've always had, I'm still diving deep into the fandom and the lore and everything about the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit and J.R.R. Tolkien. But thank you so much, everyone. This has been me, GOCARLO, the Hobbit from the Shire, and we'll see you guys next time in Middle Earth. Peace out, everyone.